Welcome to the next class on Noahide identity. We're on part 5 of dealing with the subject of Noahide identity. But today we're going to tackle the question of becoming a Noahide. What constitutes one becoming a Noahide? I hope up to this point I'm being descriptive enough and explaining the situation well enough for you to understand clearly what is a postmodern Noahide. As we've known, these terms can sometimes get convoluted at best by people who have not really studied the scholarship. Now, by no means am I touting myself as a scholar on this subject. However, I am standing on the shoulders of some many great rabbis that have went before us to study out and to make sure that the Torah law on the non-Jew is very clear. The question is how does a non-Jew accept the Sinai aspect of the Noahide laws? There is one further question that for our purposes is very important. Now, when I mention paragraph 10, paragraph 11, I'm going back to previous classes in which we're talking about specific tractate that was dealing with the Noahide or the non-Jew. It is very important that in paragraph 11, in continuation of paragraph 10, or is 11 independent of paragraph 10? Now, let's go back and look at what paragraph 10 states again. And so too, it was commanded to Moshe by the Almighty to force the peoples of the world to accept the commandments charged to the children of Noah. All who do not accept them shall be executed. One who accepts them is called a ger toshav. Now, immediately thereafter, in paragraph 11, opens up with this. All who accept the Sheva Mitzvot and are careful to observe them are called michesedi umus olam, or the pious people of the world, and they shall have a share in the world to come. Now, let me just answer this real quick. Some have asked, if you're not Jewish, you're probably going to wonder, what is the world to come? The world to come is the time period after the Messianic era in which we inherit this higher level of existence, returning back to the Garden of Eden. We will resume having bodies like Adam and Eve. That's as much as I can explain to you at this point, and many struggle to understand that. Now let's go on. If we are assuming that paragraph 11 is a continuation of paragraph 10, then it would mean that a Gentile must accept the Noahide laws before Beis Din and become a ger toshav in order to be a michesedi umos olam. If this is the case, no Gentile today can become a pious person of the nations because we cannot currently accept the ger toshav. This is the idea because we don't have a temple, we're not in Novel or Jubilee yet. If paragraph 11 is independent of paragraph 10, then a Gentile can become a michesedi umos olam even by private acceptance of the Noahide laws. That is, providing that this acceptance is based on the Sinai revelation. In such a case, acceptance of the Noahide laws is independent of the laws of the ger toshav. This reading would therefore allow for a Noahide identity independent of a ger toshav. Let's examine possible answers. For the modern Noahide, resolution of this question is vitally important. There are a number of approaches, and we're going to examine them right now. Rabbi Bezalel Zolti and Rabbi Yosef Kahneman, their view is the most radical and is based upon a super literal reading of paragraph 10 and 11. The crux of their approach is that a ger toshav is a religious status somewhere between that of a Jew and a non-Jew. Accordingly, they interpreted acceptance of the Noahide laws before a Beis Din as a conversion to a new religion, a ger toshav. The new religious identity includes the right to live in Israel, to be supported by the Jewish community, and become michesedi umos olam, or pious person of the world. According to this view, the various parts of the ger toshav identity do not exist independent of each other, nor do they exist absent of this conversion. This approach sees that paragraph 11 as a continuation of paragraph 10. However, They admit that their opinion is only theoretical because we cannot accept Ger Toshav in our times. So modern Noahides are then left with only one option, and to be lesser category of one who fulfills the commandments voluntarily. Of the wise of the nations, we must reject this interpretation for two reasons. Here we go. The majority of scholars interpret Ger Toshav as a legal construct, not as a religious identity. Number two, this approach is contrary to the practical halakha and halak reliance upon the Ravad and Kesef Mishnah's understanding of Maimonides' discussion in section 1, above, what we were just last talking about. Rabbi Yitzhak Ze'ev Soloveitchik, the Brisker Rav, and Raphael HaKohen Suskin, they adopt a very literal reading of Maimonides. Yet, unlike Rabbi Zolti and Kahneman, they treat Ger Toshav as purely legal status and not as a conversion. This legal status, however, is one indivisible whole. Acceptance of the Noahide laws before Beis Din is needed for residency support. And remember, the Ger Toshav is about residency support and nothing else. This is a legal construct or concept, and every other facet of the Ger Toshav. Therefore, Rabbi Soloveitchik and Susskind view paragraph 11 as the continuance of paragraph 10. They also require acceptance of the Noahide laws before Beis Din in order to become Chasidi Umos Olam. However, Rabbis Soloveitchik and Susskind agree that this is not possible in our times because we do not today accept Ger Toshav. As with the opinion of Rabbi Zolti and Kahneman, we must also reject that if of Rabbis Soloveitchik and Susskind, their literalist reading of the Maimonides also precludes relying upon the opinions of Rafkid and Kesef Mishnah to explain the residency of a non-Jew in a modern-day Israel. Rabbi Meir Simcha HaKohen of Divin, Rabbi Meir Simcha agrees with Rabbi Soloveitchik with Ger Toshav is not a conversion to a new religious identity, but purely legal construct. Like the Ravad and Kesef Mishnah, the Rabbi Meir Simcha maintains that the various facets of Ger Toshav may exist independent of each other. However, Rabbi Simcha does not address our specific question. Is acceptance of the Noahide laws before a Beis Din needed to become a pious person of the nations? His view allows for two possibilities. Number one, that a Noahide may accept the commandments on his own and become Chasidi Mascholam, or two, even though accepted before Beis Din, for support is not possible today, it is nevertheless required, even today, to become a pious person of the nation, officially recognized. This second possibility is intriguing. Even though a Ger Toshav is purely legal construct, the fact that the various aspects of it exist independently allow for the identity of the Mechasidi Umas Ha'olam to exist independently. Yet, the identity of the pious of the world is fundamentally different than other elements of Ger Toshav. It is inherently a matter of religious identity. Perhaps then accepting the Noahide laws is to become one of the pious of the nations is a type of religious conversion independent of other aspects of the Ger Toshav. This certainly makes a sense considering the acceptance of the Noahide laws is essentially the acceptance of a new Sinaitic covenant. When a Gentile wishes to convert to Judaism, the most important requirement is his acceptance before Beis Din of the Sinai covenant and the acceptance of the 613 commandments. May we then infer that the acceptance of the Sinai aspect of Noahide laws by Gentiles should also be required acceptance before Beis Din. Because remember, when we talked about before, after Moshe, there became the requirement of the nations to identify and recognize the laws came from God through Moshe. Although I find the logic behind this possibility intensely appealing, it doesn't hold up to scrutiny, and there are many debates still continuing to this day about this very subject. A non-Jew's acceptance of the 7 mitzvahs is fundamentally different from conversion to Judaism. Conversion to Judaism requires the acceptance of new commandments to which the prospective convert has no obligation. However, the acceptance of the Noahide laws involves the acceptance of laws which were the material of a prior covenant. In fact, non-Jews receive reward for fulfillment of the Noahide laws, even without having accepted them as per the Sinai reaffirmation. Therefore, if a Noahide wishes to accept the Sinai Noahide covenant, it is not accepting a completely new body of law, only modifying his conventional obligation. What does this mean? Prior to Sinai, it was about accepting what was conventionally obligated from Adam through Abraham, through Shem and Abraham. Now, in this case, it is having to do with the fact that the Sinai laws were codified, the Noahide laws. Once again, also a non-Jew who accepts the Noahide laws due to the Sinai covenant remains a non-Jew. The only practical change is the nature of his reward. Let me explain. When a non-Jew becomes a Jew, however, the conversion confers an entirely new legal, metaphysical, and spiritual identity. Lastly, the requirements of a Beis Din for the sake of Jewish conversion is derived from Numbers 15:16. One mishpat, or one judgment, shall for you and convert. The word mishpat indicates a comparison between conversion and legal proceeding. Just as mishpat, judgment, requires a Beis Din, so too does conversion to Judaism. This derivation is only made with regard to full conversion and nothing else. Now, Rabbi Tenenbaum is one of the scholars who contributed to the above discussion interpretation of Maimonides, paragraph 11, and Bava Kama 38a. His statement is one of the most eloquent and prompts an interesting question. Why would the acceptance of the Sinai reaffirmation of the Noahide laws be predicated on becoming a Ger Toshav? If Noahides accept this Sinai reaffirmation, then trying acceptance to Ger Toshav makes it impossible for them to accept it unless they may accept Ger Toshav. And there is no apparent reason for the two to be related. It must be, therefore, that paragraph 11 discusses Noahides in general, independent of Ger Toshav. Since Noahide identity is independent of Ger Toshav, there is no reason to assume that one must accept the Noahide laws before Beis Din. Now, let's talk about Rabbi Moshe Weiner and the Sefer Sheva Mitzvot Hashem. Rabbi Weiner, after surveying the various readings of Maimonides, concludes that personal acceptance of the Noahide laws is sufficient to become Michasedi Umos Olam, or pious of the nation. In his conclusion, he offers a proof from Maimonides. It comes from Hilachot Melachim. If a ben Noah who is converted and circumcised and immersed in a mikveh desires to revert back to his previous status as a Ger Toshav, we may not listen to him. He remains a Jew in every way or must be executed. And if he was a minor under the age of 12 or 13 and immersed by a Beis Din for the sake of conversion, he may renounce his conversion when he attains the majority age of 12, 13 and assumes the status of a Ger Toshav. The law is that a minor may not convert to Judaism on his own because, as a minor, he cannot make such a commitment. Rather, the Beis Din oversees his conversion as a minor, but allows him to choose his identity upon adulthood. If he chooses to renounce his Judaism at this time, he may do so. Now, Rabbi Weiner draws the attention to the fact that a child automatically assumes the status of a Ger Toshav upon renouncing his conversion. Rabbi Weiner continues and notes that this does not make sense, for we do not currently accept a Ger Toshav. Obviously, the answer is Maimonides is only speaking of a time when the acceptance of a Ger Toshav. However, when Rabbi Weiner writes, this cannot be so. In every instance in which Maimonides invokes the Ger Toshav, he is careful to note that it does not apply in our times. Maimonides' thoughts makes no such qualification here. Therefore, Maimonides must hold that the Ger Toshav status of a minor who rejects his conversion does in fact exist in our times. However, the child attains this status without having to accept the Sheva Mitzvot anew. before Beis Din. Rabbi Weiner concludes that one who accepts the Noahide laws without acceptance before Beis Din attains some partial identity as a ger toshav, even in our times, and is thus michesedi umos olam. Let's look at Maimonides. Maimonides' own words states to the above, and will add Maimonides' own words penned in response to a question as to the merit non-Jews receive. As for this question about the Gentile nations, you should know that God desires the heart and that matters flows from the heart's intentions. Therefore, our rabbis and sages of truth, peace be upon them, have said the pious of the Gentile nations have a share in the world to come. This is if they have achieved that which is proper to achieve of the knowledge of the Creator. Then without doubt, anyone who has improved his soul with correct virtues, wisdom, and faith in the Creator, blessed be He, is certainly among those destined for the world to come. However, nowhere here does Maimonides require acceptance of the Noahide laws before Beis Din in order to merit eternal reward. In fact, Maimonides mentions no such requirement in any of his writings. To the contrary, Maimonides states explicitly in this letter that the merit of the world to come, the identity of Michasedi, Humos Olam is dependent on the heart, upon personal acceptance of the Noahide laws as per the Sinai reaffirmation. There's not a single source anywhere in all the Torah literature which mandates acceptance of the Noahide laws before Beis Din in order to become a pious person of the nation. That is, in this day. This idea is a possibility merely implied by how one reads the juxtaposed ideas of Maimonides' two paragraphs. The halakhic, practical conclusion is that acceptance of the Noahide laws before Beis Din is not required for one to become michesedi umas alam. If a Noahide insists upon accepting his obligation before Beis Din, it is certainly not prohibited for him to do so. This acceptance, however, conveys no status of ger toshav because this status cannot be conferred in our times. So how does one become a ben Noach or bat Noach? To become a Noahide, one must accept the Sheva mitzvot, the 7 categories, and place them upon himself from the conviction that they are divinely ordained, having been commanded to the world by God through Moshe, who reaffirmed the covenant sealed with Adam and then Noah. By accepting the Sheva mitzvot, or the 7 mitzvahs as such, one becomes michasedi umos ha'alam, a pious Gentile, and the highest status attainable by a ben or bat Noah. While any personal acceptance of the Sheva mitzvot is sufficient, it makes logical sense to capture the intention of the acceptance in the form of a verbal oath enumerating the Sheva mitzvot and stating one's motivation to accept them. Now, any text accomplishing these goals is sufficient. For example, I accept upon myself the 7 commandments of the children of Noah, including the general and specific prohibitions of idolatry, murder, theft, sexual immorality, blasphemy, eating flesh torn from a living animal, and the general and specific commandments establish a system of justice as commanded to Noah, Adam, and their descendants. By the mouth of the Holy One, blessed be He, Creator of the universe, as reaffirmed and transmitted by His servant Moshe at the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. One is not required to accept the mitzvot before a Jewish court, a Beis Din, or assembly of other persons. Any personal or private acceptance of the Sheva mitzvot is sufficient. Nevertheless, it is a good idea to make verbal acceptance before a witness. Why is that? Well, accountability. Accountability is an important thing. Also, it drives home the reality that you are making a commitment before another human being. Now, there are many Noahides through the World Noahide Center and also through nativonline.org have taken the opportunity to go to a Beis Din physically, that was before COVID, and virtually through World Noahide Center, in which they make an oath before a Beis Din, and it is accepted. It is signed by our 3 righteous Jews, rabbis, or he can be a non-rabbi Jew, but a scholar. But it's all right if you want to do it in front of a group of B'nai Noach that you are in relationship and fellowship. I know that some in other parts of the country, East Tennessee, et cetera, there's nothing wrong with you guys getting together and having a rabbi attend sort of an ad hoc court to make a declaration. But clearly it's not necessary. Why? Because Maimonides makes it very clear. And also we know the Torah makes it very clear. It's matters of the heart. What matters to Hashem? He's not going to be checking your Jew card. He's not going to be checking your Ger card. He's not going to be checking your Noahide card. He's not going to be checking to see if you have a letter from a base den. It says the Mashiach, when he comes, he will know a person's tribe by their heart. He will know their motivations and their intent, and therefore be able to know where they belong in this world. If your intent is to connect to Hashem and to love Hashem and to embrace all that is beautiful about the Torah and the Jewish people, it's about the heart. Now, for those who are not Jewish, who are watching this course, I admonish you to grow in your knowledge of God. This isn't about, like I've said many times before, about studying for study's sake. You are studying to connect to the Holy One, blessed be He.